So, and before Hamburg, Trump had been here in Poland. He'd given a speech with his, it's discussed because there is something in that. So what do you think about that particular message Trump has sent, and what is this message? How you?
So it was an odd speech. What it essentially did was it called on Poles to join what sounded like, but although it was very carefully couched, a kind of war of civilizations against Islam. That we need to unite together as the West to defeat our enemies. The enemies were left a little bit vague. It sounded like maybe he meant Islamic terrorism, maybe he meant something broader. It wasn't really clear. It's a strange message for Poland because Poland is not at war with Islam or Islamic terrorism. There are no, there's a tiny, completely inconsequential, maybe in the few hundreds Muslim population here, and Poland doesn't have any refugees, nor do many want to come. Although interestingly, the one group of refugees who have come here in the recent years and were actually pretty successfully integrated were Chechens. So there are a few Chechens. Other than that, nobody else. So he seemed to be wanting to include Poland in this great struggle, but it wasn't clear that it was something that was in Poland's interest. To a lot of people, this speech sounded like what it was really doing was supporting the illiberal policies of the Polish government. It made it sound like, what really ties us is links of family, blood, God, rather than democracy, values, rule of law, and so on. So the way it was heard here in Poland was as a kind of, don't worry about democracy, we in the West are linked by Christianity. And I know that I'm simplifying, it's not quite what he said, but that's how it was interpreted here.
We have President Trump coming to Poland. He's delivered his speech, and it really is connected to his further discussions in Hamburg with the G20, because he deliberately have chosen your country. So what is your take on the speech? What was important? How do you think, how would you assess it?
I think it was a very important speech, both for Poland, but also for Europe, and presumably for the West as such. For Poland, it was important because it acknowledged the critical role the country is playing in mutual defense within NATO. Now, for Europe, the speech was very important because it was a speech that I would not see as divisive. It was a speech that's talked about stronger Europe as an American partner. And it's good news for the world because Donald Trump has showed himself as a president that sticks to the mainstream of American foreign policy. So the commitment to the transatlantic alliance, the commitment to the West as such, and for this reason, it was a good speech. Now, if there was anything that I did not feel comfortable with in the speech, was probably the question of this huge fight of our Western civilization against Islamic terrorism. And although I am a strong supporter myself of decisive actions to counter terrorism, I am also very wary of the fact that we already had an American president, George W. Bush, who talked about the war on terror, and the concrete measures that followed that, the war in Iraq, has not brought the resolution to terrorism. Finally, I feel very satisfied that for the first time President Trump was so strong on Russia. So he clearly said that Russia has to stop destabilizing Ukraine. He's clearly said that Russia is not going anywhere if it continues to support regimes such as the Syrian regime, Assad. But at the same time, it was saying we want to cooperate with you, and you have more interest with us than you think, but you have to stop this destructive behavior. So in that sense, again, he's in the mainstream. This might find some kind of discomfort in Central Europe because we simply know how hard it is to cooperate on anything with the Russian Federation. And I think these thoughts were also in the minds of many Polish decision makers who are listening to the speech. But we also have have to acknowledge that America is a great power that has a larger vision than only Central European vision to the world.
But what do you would say to those who rather argue that there was really speech, that it was partly divisive, that it was so much about the values, conservative values, rather than those who would like to erase our borders? I would quote President Trump.
First of all, Donald Trump represents a very conservative right part of the American political establishment and the American electorate. So for me, this was in a way, you know, the references he made to the value of family, of God, these were references to his mainstream electorate. But then other references followed: the rights of women, democracy, freedom of media. There was a lot of, again, of these traditional mainstream liberal democratic values and issues that were mentioned there. So it was a very eclectic speech. Now we can disagree. And I personally would probably disagree with associating the Western civilization with only such values as family and God. They can be important and should be important, but they're also important for the Islam civilization. They're also important for the Russian civilization. So we have to ask ourselves what differentiates us from the civilizations. If we're all only for having a solid family and believing in God, then I think we are not the Western civilization that we thought we are. So again, if he would not mention the other things, I would be very worried.